time to bring you up to speed what's happening globally and in Nigeria. We begin with at least 23 dead in Papua New Guinea floods. North Korea advances hypersonic missile development. Blinken reaffirms U.S. commitment to defend Philippines. And Trump in panic mode over looming bond deadline. U.S. court holds Texas immigration law. No less than 23 people have been killed as torrential rain and king tides wash away roads, homes, and food gardens in Papua New Guinea's PNG Highland and coastal regions. The acting director for the National Disaster Center said, according to reports, that the dead, including a mother and her child, died in landslides in the Highlands province of Chimbu, Luzet Man. The 23 were buried under tons of mud in 3 separate landslides, Man said on Monday. We are all experiencing heavy rains, landslide, flooded rivers that have caused extensive damages in the highlands. Coastal communities in the Gulf province south of Chimbu were also submerged. According to reports on Wednesday, king tides flooded the coastal village of Lesser Kavora, triggering extensive damage to food gardens and contaminating freshwater sources. Community members have since deliberated possible options for moving the village, report added, as this is not the first time the village has been pulled under king tides due to climate change causing the rise in sea level. Heavy flooding also spread to the highlands of province of Enga, with the community leader of Wepenamanda, Aquila Kunzi, telling RNZ Pacific the community was rationing its food supply. He added that over 100 women and children had taken refuge in his village following nearby tribal warfare. According to the 2022 War Risk Index, Papua New Guinea PNG is ranked as the world's 16th most at-risk country to climate change and natural hazards. Its mountainous highlands are home to the third largest rainforest on Earth after the Amazon and the Congo Basin rainforest. But logging from palm oil plantations and foreign timber companies has seen large areas of the rainforest cleared. PNG is the world's 5th largest exporter of palm oil, with most of its exports going to India, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, and Malaysia in 2022. Clearing rainforests adds to climate change but also causes local environmental degradation that can make floods and landslides worse. North Korea has successfully tested a solid fuel engine for its new type intermediate range hypersonic missile. The development was reported on Wednesday, suggesting progress in Pyongyang's effort to develop a more powerful, agile missile that could be capable of hitting further away targets in the region, including Guam, a territory of the United States. Kim Jong-un, North Korean leader, oversaw the test, which took place on Tuesday at the Sohe satellite launching ground in the country's northwest, reports said. According to more reports citing Kim, he said the strategic value of the intermediate range missile was as important as intercontinental ballistic missiles targeting the U.S. mainland, and that enemies know better about it. It added that a timetable for completing the development of the new weapon system was set through the great success of the important test. He announced in 2021 that he wanted to modernize the military and announce a series of technologically advanced weapon systems, including a hypersonic missile that North Korea planned to develop. The country conducted a test of an intermediate range hypersonic missile in January, which it said involved a new solid fuel engine. On Tuesday, a report did not elaborate on the engine tested or reveal the technical nature of the test. Solid fuel missiles can be launched more quickly than their liquid fuel counterparts and are easier to move and conceal, which theoretically makes them harder to detect. Hypersonic weapons are designed to fly at speeds in excess of 5 times the speed of sound. If perfected, such systems could potentially pose a challenge to regional missile defense systems because of their speed and maneuverability. Pyongyang's newest announcement came a day after North Korea said Kim oversaw maneuvers involving newly equipped super-large multiple rocket launchers. North Korea has been engaged in a provocative run of missile tests since 2022. The U.S. and South Korean militaries have responded by expanding their bilateral exercises and trilateral drills involving Japan. Now, on Tuesday, Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, repeated the United States ironclad commitment to defend the Philippines as rising tensions with China in the South China Sea raise fears of a wider regional conflict. Stability in the region is seen as being progressively threatened by clashes between Chinese Coast Guard and maritime militia units and Philippine vessels around disputed water features in the waterway. In the most recent confrontation 2 weeks ago, a Chinese Coast Guard vessel used a water cannon against a Philippine boat, shattering its glass panel and injuring 4 Filipino sailors. Speaking at a joint news conference with his Philippine counterpart in Manila, Blinken said the allies have a shared concern about the PRC's People's Republic of China actions that threaten our common vision for a free, open Indo-Pacific, including in the South China Sea and in the Philippines exclusive economic zone. The U.S. military maintains a regular presence in the South China Sea with aircraft overflights, so-called freedom of navigation operations and patrols, and exercises with allies and partners to assert that the sea is an international waterway. Blinken said a mutual defense treaty signed in 1951, under which Washington is bound to defend Manila from attack, is ironclad and extends to armed attacks on the Filipino armed forces, public vessels, aircraft, including those of its Coast Guard anywhere in the South China Sea. The extraordinary expansion of relations between the U.S. and the Philippines had been in hyperdrive in recent months, Blinken said. But the closer partnership was not aimed at any country, the top U.S. diplomat and Philippine Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Enrique Manalos, insisted. The Philippine official also emphasized that Manila intended to resolve disputes through peaceful diplomacy. China claims indisputable sovereignty over almost all 1.3 million square miles of the resource-rich South China Sea, despite a 2016 ruling to the contrary by an international tribunal in The Hague. Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Lin Jian said on Tuesday the U.S. is not a party to the South China Sea issue and has no right to interfere in the maritime issues between China and the Philippines. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has openly aligned with the U.S. since winning power in 2020 in a shift from his predecessor's closer relationship with Beijing, and has taken a stronger line on criticizing China's actions in the South China Sea. Tuesdays marked Blinken's second visit to Manila since Marcos took office and comes weeks before President Joe Biden is set to host the Philippine President and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida at a White House summit in April. Blinken described the upcoming summit as a new horizon of cooperation that is incredibly promising in remarks before he met with Marcos on Tuesday. Now on judicial matters, according to several sources familiar with his thinking, ex-US President Donald Trump is in panic mode as the deadline approaches to secure a $500 million bond to appeal his civil fraud case in New York. On Monday, Trump's lawyers acknowledged that he was struggling to find an insurance company willing to underwrite his $454 million bond. Privately, Trump had been counting on Chubb, which underwrote his $91.6 million bond to cover the Asian Carroll judgment, to come through. But the insurance giant informed his attorneys in the last several days that that option was off the table. Trump's team has sought out wealthy supporters and weighed what assets could be sold, and fast. The presumptive GOP presidential nominee himself has become increasingly concerned about the optics the March 25th deadline could present, especially the prospect that someone whose identity has long been tied to his wealth will confront financial crisis. Trump has continued to privately lash out at the New York Attorney General Letitia James and Judge Arthur Engoron over the matter, this said according to reports. Shortly before 6:30 a.m. on Tuesday, Trump took his grievances public, posting on his social media platform 8 times within 2 hours about the deadline, arguing that he shouldn't have to put up the money and worrying that he will be forced to mortgage or sell great assets, perhaps at fire sale prices, and if and when I win the appeal, they would be gone. As Trump and his legal team wait to see whether an appeals court will post the judgment as he appeals it or allow him to pay a smaller bond of $100 million, He has privately expressed opposition to any part concerning filing for bankruptcy, and he remains the least likely for now, one person familiar with the talks said, according to reports. But his lawyers told the New York Appeals Court on Monday that he has approached 30 underwriters to back the bond, and the former president himself said on Truth Social he thought it was practically impossible for him to post the amount. Potential underwriters are seeking cash to back the bonds, not properties, according to Trump's lawyers. The bond stems from Engoron's ruling last month, which ordered Trump to pay $355 million in disgorgement or ill-gotten gains in the case brought by James. The judge wrote in his opinion that Trump and his co-defendants, including his adult sons, were liable for fraud, conspiracy, and issuing false financial statements and false business records, finding that the defendants fraudulently inflated the value of Trump's assets to obtain more favorable loan and insurance rates. The amount Trump owed surpassed $450 million with interest included. Still on judicial matters, a U.S. federal appeals court issued an order that stops Texas state authorities from keeping and deporting migrants and asylum seekers alleged of entering the United States illegally hours after the Supreme Court allowed the strict new immigration law to take effect. The decision on Tuesday by the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals came weeks after a panel on the same court cleared the way for Texas to enforce the controversial law by putting a pause on a lower judge's injunction. But by a 2-1 order, a panel of the appeals court lifted that pause ahead of arguments before the court on Wednesday. The Supreme Court lifted a suspension earlier on Tuesday on the measure that critics have dubbed the Show Me Your Papers law. The top court on Tuesday voted 6-3 to allow the law, Texas Senate Bill 4 SBF 4, to go immediately into effect. However, legal scholars have argued that the law subverts the federal government constitutional authority to carry out immigration enforcement. Rights groups have also cautioned it threatens to add racial profiling and imperil the rights of asylum seekers. The American Civil Liberties Union, for instance, called SB 4 one of the most extreme anti-migrant laws ever passed by any state legislature in the United States. Tuesday's Supreme Court action does not weigh the merits of the law, which continues to be challenged in lower courts. It instead vacates a lower court ruling that paused the law from going into effect. The administration of President Joe Biden has challenged SB 4 on the grounds that the law is unconstitutional. Texas Governor Greg Abbott and State Attorney General Ken Paxton, both Republicans, have argued that SB 4 runs parallel to but does not conflict with federal U.S. law. In a post on X on Wednesday, Abbott, who had earlier called the Supreme Court decision a positive development, said hundreds on the terror watch list have entered our country illegally under President Biden. This would not stand. Paxton, whose office is defending the law in court, earlier described the Supreme Court decision as a huge win. The duo have become national conservative figureheads in their criticism of the Biden administration's border policy and issues set to dominate the 2024 presidential elections. Texas, a southwestern state, shares a 3,145 kilometers border with Mexico. Texas leaders have said the new law is needed to control the record numbers of irregular crossings along the border in recent years. Signed into law in December, SB 4 is an extension of Abbott's Operation Lone Star, a border security program that launched in March 2021 and has since grown into a $12 billion US dollars initiative. Away from judicial matters now, high drug offense executions happened in 2023. An NGO that has been tracking the use of death penalty for drugs since 2007 said no less than 467 people were executed for drug offenses in 2023, a new record according to Harm Reduction International (HRI). Despite not accounting for dozens, if not hundreds, of executions believed to have taken place in China, Vietnam, and North Korea, the 467 executions that took place in 2023 represent a 44% increase from 2022, HRI said in its report, which was released on Tuesday. drug executions made up about 42% of all known death sentences carried out around the world last year, it added. HRI said it had confirmed drug-related executions in countries including Iran, Kuwait, and Singapore. China treats death penalty data as a state secret, and secrecy surrounds the punishment in countries including Vietnam and North Korea. Information gaps on death sentences persist, meaning many, if not most, death sentences imposed in 2023 remain unknown, the report said. Most notably, no accurate figure can be provided for China, Iran, North Korea, Saudi Arabia, and Thailand. These countries are all believed to regularly impose a significant number of death sentences for drug offenses. International law prohibits the use of the death penalty for crimes that are not intentional and of the most serious nature. The United Nations has stressed that drug offenses does not meet that threshold. Singapore has drawn international criticism after resuming the use of the death penalty in March 2022 following a 2-year hiatus during the pandemic. Some 11 executions carried out by hanging took place that year, and at least 16 people had been hanged as of November 2023, according to Human Rights Watch. Among those executed was Suridewi Jimani, a Singaporean woman who was convicted of drug trafficking in 2018. She was the first woman to be executed in the city-state for almost 20 years. HRI said such confirmed sentences last year increased by over 20% from 2022. About half of those were passed by courts in Vietnam and a quarter in Indonesia. At the end of 2023, some 34 countries continue to retain the death penalty for drug crimes. In African shores, U.S. hopeful for partnership with Niger. The Pentagon is working with Nigerian authorities to find a way to keep U.S. troops in the country, a major base for counter-terrorism operations in sub-Saharan Africa, following a weekend directive ordering them to leave the country. A high-level delegation of U.S. officials, including Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs Molly Fee, Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs Celeste Walanda, and Head of State Command United for Africa General Michael Lagley, last week journeyed to Niger to meet members of the military junta. Sabrina Singh, Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary, said on Monday that U.S. officials had lengthy and direct discussions with junta members, discussions that were partly motivated by concerns about Niger's potential relations with Russia and Iran. The United States is closely monitoring Russia's defense activities there to assess and mitigate potential risks to personnel, American interests, and property, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said. On Saturday, following the meeting, junta spokesperson Colonel Major Ahmadu Abdurrahman said U.S. flights over Nigerian territory in recent weeks were illegal. Insa Garba Saidu, a local activist who assists Niger's military leaders with their communications, criticized U.S.'s efforts to force the junta to choose between its strategic partners. Sabrina Singh said the United States is aware of the March 16 statement announcing the end of the status of forces agreement between Niger and the United States. We are working through diplomatic channels to seek clarification. These are ongoing discussions and we have nothing further to share at this time. The discussions were driven by Niger's trajectory, State Department spokesperson Vondet Patel said, adding that we are in contact with the transitional authorities to seek clarification on their comments and to discuss next steps. Since July, the junta has largely controlled Niger when mutinous soldiers removed the country's democratically elected president and months later demanded French forces leave the country. The U.S. military still had some 650 troops in Niger as of December, largely concentrated at a base further from Niamey, Niger's capital. South Africa, ANC sues new opposition party. South Africa's ruling African National Congress, ANC, is suing the independent electoral body and a rival political party led by a former president, stressing divisions ahead of what could be the most critical election of the last 30 years in the country. The ANC says the new Umkhonto weSizwe Spare of the Nation party did not meet the registration criteria in September. The case opened on Tuesday before the electoral court in Bloemfontein in the center of the country. The latest party, also known as MK and led by ex-South African president and former ANC leader Jacob Zuma, could be deregistered and unable to contest the May 29th national elections. MK officials said they will not accept being disqualified, with one even threatening civil war. MK sought trouble within the ANC by using the name of its now disbanded military wing, which had been founded by Nelson Mandela. The ANC is challenging the use of the name and a logo that bears a striking resemblance to that of its former military branch in separate legal proceedings over copyright infringement. Zuma's decision to pledge support for MK has added a fresh element to the bitter rivalry. The two parties have exchanged insults in recent months. ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula called Zuma the most destructive person to South Africa's democratic progress and referred to the new party's officials as his Chihuahuas. He was forced out of South Africa's leadership in 2018 following corruption allegations and is currently on trial for corruption, although that case has faced long delays. He has been extremely critical of the ANC of his successor, current South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. Zuma was suspended from the ANC after publicly supporting MK. He attended Tuesday's hearing at the Electoral Court, as did Mbalula. The ANC has governed South Africa for 30 years since the end of the apartheid system of racial segregation in 1994, but it is expected to face its toughest test in the vote of this year. Several polls predict that the ANC will lose its majority for the first time and will be forced to form a coalition to stay in power. And now I'll take a short break, and when I come back, I'll bring you stories from Nigeria. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Now, stories from Nigeria. We begin with security matters. Delta soldiers killing stokes panic as troops hunt killers. Fear has enthralled Bayelsa communities as the defense headquarters deepen manhunt for killers of 17 officers and soldiers of the Nigerian army who were murdered in Okoma, Uheli South local government area of Delta State last Thursday. According to reports, fear in the oil-rich state was heightened by the broadly acknowledged association of some purported state officials with the prime suspect in the dastardly act. He was said to be close to some key officials of the state government. Already, the fate of the soldiers has pitted the governor Doi Diri against one of his predecessors and former Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Chief Timipre Silva. Diri has played Silva for politicizing the bloody incident. It was also gathered that the authorities in the DHQ have narrowed down investigation into the odious crime to the suspected leader of the Okoma Gili gang, which murdered the troops, including the commanding officer of 181 Battalion of the Nigerian Army in Bomadi, the headquarters of Bomadi local government area of Delta State, Lieutenant Colonel A.H. Aliyu. Other officers killed in the bloody incident, as identified by the Defense Headquarters, were Major S.D. Shafar, Major D.E. Obi, and Captain U. Zakari. And on Sunday, angry troops of the Nigerian Army had stormed an Ijaw community in Bayelsa State, Igbomoturu, in southern Ijaw local government area, the paternal home of the alleged ringleader, in a futile search for him. Okoma, the center of wanton killing, was regarded as the suspect's maternal community. Although the suspect acting on a tip-off fled the community before the arrival of the troops, the invasion left its trail large-scale destruction of life and property. No fewer than 11 indigents of the community are feared dead in the incident. On elections, and finally on the news, Edo Guba, 6 parties submit nominations, says INEC. Only 6 of the 18 registered political parties have filed their nominations. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, had set just 4 days to the March 24th deadline for nomination of governorship and deputy governorship candidates for the September 21st, 2024 election in Edo State. Yesterday, while making the revelation, the electoral umpire warned political parties against granting needless waivers to new entrants and offering them their tickets, saying such development has continued to put a lot of litigation costs on the commission. This was as it told parties seeking participation in the election that it will not extend the March 24th timeline for the nomination of their candidate. Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, INEC chairman, revealed this at the first regular quarterly consultative meeting with political parties. He said for the Ondo State governorship election, party primaries will begin in the next 2 weeks on April 6, 2024, and end 3 weeks later on April 27th. According to him, so far, 16 of 19 political parties have indicated interest in participating in the election. While the Edo State governorship election holds on Saturday, September 21st, 2024, the Ondo State governorship election is holding on Saturday, November 16th, 2024. A recap of major stories says at least 23 dead in Papua New Guinea floods. North Korea advances hypersonic missile development. Blinken reaffirms U.S. commitment to defend the Philippines. Trump in panic mode over looming bond deadline, and U.S. court holds Texas immigration law. And that's all on the news. Thanks for watching from all the crew. Have a good day.